Ma'am, with all due respect, what's your call sign? The inquiry, delivered across the loud mess hall, was coated in a syrupy, almost theatrical curiosity. It originated from a Marine captain whose desert marpat uniform sleeves were rolled to a perfectly knife-edged crispness. His name tape read Davis. He leaned forward, sporting a conspiratorial grin aimed not at her, but at the two junior lieutenants seated on either side of him. This was clearly a performance. Sierra Knox did not glance up from her tray, choosing instead to finish chewing a piece of grilled chicken with movements that were deliberate and unhurried. Her royal blue top, a simple civilian blouse, stood out dramatically against the uniform sea of green and tan, the very source of the captain's misplaced confidence. To him, she was an outsider. A civilian, a contractor, perhaps an aide to a visiting dignitary who had simply wandered in. "I'm sorry?" she asked, her voice even, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes were clear, steady, and utterly revealing nothing. "Your call sign," Captain Davis repeated, raising his voice to enjoy the ripple of attention spreading from their table. "You're here at VMA 214, the Black Sheep Squadron. Everyone's got a call sign, it's a pilot thing. Or did your husband just tell you the cool stories?" One of the lieutenants beside him snickered. The other looked down with a flicker of decency. Sierra's expression remained unchanged. Slung over the back of her chair was a sage green flight jacket. A single, slightly worn patch was sewn onto the right breast, depicting a stylized Grim Reaper holding a busted hydraulic line that dripped a thick, viscous fluid. Stitched in black below it were two cryptic words. Davis hadn't bothered to look. He was too busy observing her blonde hair pulled back in a neat bun, her civilian attire, and the woman he had already judged and dismissed. "I don't think we've been introduced," Sierra said, her tone quiet, yet carrying a strange, heavy weight that momentarily seemed to dim the surrounding clatter of cutlery. "I'm Sierra Knox." Davis offered his name with a magnanimous nod, as if granting her an audience. "Captain Davis," he stated. "Squadron adjutant, which means I'm responsible for the comings and goings around here. And I don't have a record of a miss on our visitor log for today's flight ops brief." He was clearly fishing, attempting to expose her as someone who did not belong. "I'm not here for the brief," she replied simply, taking a sip of water. The quiet standoff was beginning to draw more eyes. Marines were trained to notice anything out of place, and the slow, grinding tension at this table was flashing like a red warning light. Davis's smile grew tight, his friendly condescension now curdling into palpable irritation. He had anticipated her being flustered, blushing, and quickly explaining that she was merely waiting for her pilot husband. Her composure was, instead, a direct and unacceptable challenge to his perceived authority within this space. "Look, ma'am," he said, dropping all pretense of politeness. "This is a secure facility. The mess hall is for uniformed personnel, their dependents, and cleared contractors. I need to see some identification." He wasn't technically incorrect about the base policy, but his aggressive application of it was clearly being used as a weapon. Dozens of civilians, actual contractors, retired veterans in polo shirts, visiting family, ate there every day without being questioned. He had deliberately singled her out. Sierra held his gaze for a long moment. She possessed the immediate means to end the confrontation. Her common access card was readily accessible in her pocket. A quick flash of the eagle, globe, and anchor, or in her case, the Hap Arnold wings of the Air Force, would have instantly vaporized his smug certainty. But something about his swagger, about the casual, ingrained dismissal of her presence, made her hesitate. She had witnessed this exact look countless times, in briefing rooms, on flight lines, and during promotion board reviews. It was a subtle, persistent friction she had spent her entire career learning to navigate. "My ID is in my jacket," she stated, her voice still infuriatingly calm. "I'm just trying to finish my lunch." This declaration was the final straw for Davis. It was overt defiance. He pushed his chair back, its metal legs scraping harshly against the linoleum. The sound was sharp enough to halt several nearby conversations. "The jacket with the little costume patch on it," he scoffed, finally gesturing toward her flight jacket. "Right. I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. We need to verify who you are and what you're doing on my base." The possessive phrase, "my base," hung in the air, causing one of his lieutenants to shift uncomfortably. "Sir, maybe we should just—" "Quiet, Lieutenant," Davis snapped, his eyes locked on Sierra. He felt the full weight of the room's attention and mistakenly interpreted it as validation. He saw himself as the protector of the tribe, the enforcer putting an imposter in her place. Sierra slowly set her fork down on her tray. She looked at Captain Davis, her eyes tracing the clean lines of his uniform and the silver bars on his collar. She saw a man who had likely never had to justify his presence a day in his life. A man for whom the uniform was both a suit of armor and a cloak of invisibility. "Captain," she said, her voice now cold and precise, stripped of any warmth. "You have two options. You can return to your seat and finish your meal, or you can proceed with this course of action. I feel obligated to inform you that the second option will have a significant and negative impact on your career." The threat was so direct, so utterly devoid of emotion, that it momentarily stunned him. The threat was so direct, so devoid of emotion, that it momentarily stunned him. For the first time, a sliver of doubt pierced his arrogance, but he was too deep now. The eyes of the entire mess hall were on him. Backing down was unthinkable. "Is that a threat, ma'am?" he asked, his voice low. "It's a weather forecast," Sierra replied. Across the room, seated alone near the window, Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole chewed his food methodically. Cole was a lifer, a career Marine who had spent more time in the fleet than Davis had been alive. He had initially noticed the woman in the blue top not for her gender, but for the economy of her motion and the quiet situational awareness in how she scanned the room before taking a seat with her back to the wall, a habit picked up in places where knowing the exits mattered. He hadn't paid much attention to the unfolding drama until he heard Davis get loud, mentioning the jacket. Cole's eyes drifted to the sage-green flight jacket slung over the chair. He squinted. The light caught the patch. A Grim Reaper. A dripping hydraulic line. Cole's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He knew that patch. He had seen it years ago, not in person, but in a grainy photo attached to a highly classified after-action report he'd had to review from a joint operation, a JSOAD, Joint Special Operations Air Detachment, that flew missions most people would never read about. They were ghosts. His eyes shot back to the woman. Blonde hair, calm demeanor. It couldn't be. The flight lead in that report, they called her. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Her call sign. The name escaped him, but the legend was sharp in his mind. A cold knot formed in Cole's stomach. This wasn't just a captain being an idiot. This was a captain poking a sleeping dragon with a sharp stick. He watched Davis stand up, watched him puff out his chest. Cole knew the situation was mere seconds away from escalating into an institutional disaster. He stood, leaving his half-eaten lunch on the table. He walked calmly, purposefully, out of the mess hall, his eyes never leaving the back of Captain Davis's head. He knew the captain was a problem for later. Right now, he had to alert the tower. He had to let the base commander know exactly who had just landed. He pulled his phone from his pocket as the mess hall doors swung shut behind him. He didn't have the colonel's cell number, but he had the next best thing, the sergeant major of the base. He thumbed the contact and lifted the phone to his ear, his mind racing. "Gunny Cole here," he said, when the call connected, his voice urgent. "Sergeant Major, you're not going to believe this, but I think Sticky Six is in our chow hall." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sharp intake of breath. "Cole, are you sure?" The sergeant major's voice was grim. "I saw the patch, and I'm watching Captain Davis from VMA 214 trying to escort her out for not having an ID." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. It was the sound of a career ending. Inside the base headquarters building, a world away from the clatter of the mess hall, Colonel Jensen was reviewing budget proposals when his sergeant major appeared in the doorway. His face was a mask of controlled urgency. Sergeant Major Thorne didn't knock. That alone was a 5-alarm fire. "Sir, we have a situation at the East Mess," Thorne said, his voice low. Jensen looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "What is it, Sergeant Major? Did the salad bar run out of ranch again?" "No, sir. Master Gunnery Sergeant Cole just called me. He says Major Sierra Knox is in the mess hall." Jensen frowned, the name unfamiliar. "And Major Knox?" "Sir, Air Force. Her call sign is Sticky 6. The name landed in the quiet office like a grenade. Colonel Jensen's posture changed instantly. The casual slouch of an administrator vanished, replaced by the rigid attention of a combat commander. He dropped the pen he was holding. It clattered sharply on the polished oak of his desk. "Sticky 6, he repeated, the name tasting like ozone and jet fuel. He hadn't heard it in years, but you never forgot a story like that. A story whispered with a kind of reverent awe at joint command briefings and in smoke pits outside classified intel vaults. "Are we sure it's her?" "Cole saw her JSO patch, sir," Thorne confirmed. "And apparently Captain Davis is having a professional disagreement with her regarding base access." Jensen swore a single, sharp syllable. He stood and walked to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He pulled up the Joint Personnel database, his security credentials granting him access to files most would never see. He typed in the name Knox, Sierra. Her file appeared. The photo showed the same woman Cole had seen, blonde hair, impossibly calm eyes, but it was the lines of text below the photo that made the air in the room go thin. "Major, USAF, Billet, Special Operations Command, Liaison 2. The rest was redacted. Below that, a list of decorations, Distinguished Flying Cross with Valor, multiple air medals, a Purple Heart, and then the citation for the DFC. It was heavily redacted, but the key phrases leaped out. Sustained heavy damage to own aircraft under direct enemy fire. Successful combat search and rescue of downed aircrew. "Get the car," Jensen said, his voice tight with command. "And get Major Evans from my staff. Now." He was already shrugging on his blouse, his movements sharp and efficient. He knew the optics of this mattered. Captain Davis wasn't just harassing a visitor, he was insulting a decorated war hero from a sister service on their turf. It was a catastrophic failure of leadership and professionalism, and it was about to be rectified very, very publicly. Back in the mess hall, Captain Davis had reached the point of no return. Sierra's calm defiance, her weather forecast, had pushed him over the edge. His authority in front of his men was on the line. "All right, that's it. You're coming with me," he said, his voice rising. He reached out in a dismissive, impatient gesture. "We can do this the easy way, or I can have the MPs escort you. Your choice. But you are leaving this facility now. I'm half convinced that Patch is a fraudulent wear of a unit insignia, and that's a federal offense." The accusation, ugly and final, hung in the air. Stolen valor. Sierra slowly rose to her feet. She wasn't tall, but she stood with a grounded stillness that made her seem to take up more space than she did. She looked at Davis, and for the first time, he saw something other than calm in her eyes. It wasn't anger, it was pity. "As you wish, Captain," she said, her voice resigned. It was at that exact moment that the main doors to the mess hall swung open. The sudden silence was absolute. Every conversation stopped, every head turned. Colonel Jensen strode into the room, his presence sucking the air out of the space. He was flanked by Sergeant Major Thorne, whose face was carved from granite, and a sharp-looking female Marine, Major Evans. They moved not like they were entering a cafeteria, but like they were stepping onto a parade deck. They scanned the room once, their gaze falling on the knot of tension in the center of the hall, and then moved directly toward it. The entire mess hall population, as if pulled by a single string, rose to its feet. Captain Davis froze, his face draining of all color. He snapped to the position of attention so violently he almost wobbled. The trio stopped a few feet from the table. Colonel Jensen's eyes were like ice chips. He completely ignored Captain Davis. His gaze was fixed solely on Sierra. He took one more step forward, stopped, and rendered a salute so sharp and precise it seemed to cut the air. "Major Knox," he said, his voice ringing with a deep, formal respect that echoed in the silent, cavernous room. "Colonel Jensen, Base Commander, welcome to Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. I must apologize for the reception. We were not aware you were on board today." Sierra returned the salute with a practiced ease that was utterly at odds with her civilian blouse. "Colonel, no apology necessary. I was just grabbing a bite to eat." Davis's world was tilting on its axis. Major. The colonel had called her Major. He had saluted her, the woman in the blue top. He felt a wave of nausea. Colonel Jensen held his salute for a moment longer before dropping it crisply. He then turned his head slowly, his eyes finally landing on Captain Davis, who looked as if he was about to faint. "Captain," Jensen said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "I understand you were curious about the Major's call sign." Davis swallowed hard. "Sir," he stammered, his voice a dry rasp, "I was just following procedure for base security." "Were you?" the colonel interrupted, his voice cutting like glass. "Because it looked to me like you were harassing a decorated officer from a sister service. Major Knox is here as a guest of SOCOM, preparing to brief my senior staff on joint operational tactics she learned firsthand." He took a step closer to Davis, lowering his voice so only those at the table could hear, but the intensity was felt throughout the room. "That patch on her jacket, the one you called a costume, that's the insignia of a JSOC she commanded. They don't just hand those out. They're forged in blood and fire." Then Jensen raised his voice again, turning slightly so that his words carried across the mess hall to the silent, watching Marines. "Some of you may have heard stories," he began, his voice the resonant baritone of a commander addressing his troops. "Stories about a pilot who during a night mission deep in hostile territory had her wingman's aircraft crippled by a surface-to-air missile. The wingman's jet was losing all hydraulic pressure, its controls locking up. They were going to have to punch out over mountains crawling with enemy fighters." A hush fell over the room. This was the language of legends. Their flight lead, flying a bird that was also damaged and leaking fuel, refused to leave. She flew a protective figure-8 pattern around the crippled jet for almost an hour, fighting off intermittent ground fire, coordinating a combat search and rescue team, and talking her terrified wingmen through the emergency procedures. Her own fuel tanks were ruptured, sloshing JP-8 fuel all over the fuselage, making it dangerously sticky and threatening to ignite with every tracer round that went past. Jensen's eyes found Sierra's. There was a profound respect in his gaze. She stayed on station until the CSR birds were in sight. Only then, with her own fuel gauge on 0, did she limp her plane back across the border, landing on fumes. She saved 2 lives that night in a $30 million aircraft. That pilot was Major Knox. The aircrew she saved gave her the call sign Sticky 6. Sticky for the fuel-soaked jet she refused to abandon. And 6 because she always has her wingman's back. The story finished. The colonel turned his full attention back to the pale, trembling captain. "So yes, Captain Davis," he said, his voice now a low growl of pure fury. "She has a call sign. She earned it in a way I pray to God you never have to, and you will address her as Major or Ma'am." He paused, letting the weight of his words crush the captain's spirit. "My office. In 5 minutes. You, me, and the Sergeant Major are going to have a detailed conversation about leadership, professionalism, and the United States Marine Corps standards for courtesy. Dismissed." Davis, his face ashen, managed a shaky, sir." He didn't dare look at Sierra. He turned and practically fled the mess hall, the collective stare of 200 Marines burning into his back. Colonel Jensen then turned back to Sierra, his expression softening immediately. "Major, again, on behalf of the entire command, I am truly sorry. Please allow me to escort you to the O Club. Lunch is on me." Sierra offered a small, tired smile. She looked around at the faces of the young Marines staring at her with a new, undisguised awe. "Thank you, Colonel," she said, "but that won't be necessary. It was a misunderstanding." She then looked directly at Major Evans, the female officer who had accompanied the colonel. "The only thing we need to do is make sure our people understand the standard. The same standard for everyone. Don't soften it, just apply it fairly. See the uniform, not the person wearing it. Or in this case," she added with a dry glance at her blue top, "recognize the bearing of someone who wears it even when they're not." Her words were a masterclass in grace. She didn't demand an apology or retribution. She offered a lesson, a course correction. As she spoke, a final, sharp memory echoed in her mind. It wasn't the whole chaotic event, but a single, crystalline moment from that long-ago night. The cockpit was filled with the acrid smell of burning electronics and the sweet, sickening scent of aerosolized jet fuel. Red lights flashed across the instrument panel, a Christmas tree of catastrophic failures. Below her lay the black teeth of the mountains. On the radio, her wingman's breathing was ragged with fear. And through it all, she remembered the feel of the control stick in her hand, slick and tacky with the hydraulic fluid that had sprayed from a ruptured line in her own canopy. Sticky. It was the last sensation she processed before she keyed the mic and said, in a voice she barely recognized as her own, "Hang on, buddy. I'm not leaving you." That was the moment Sticky Six was born. In the dark, in the fire, in the quiet, absolute refusal to let a fellow warrior fall. The weeks that followed, Captain Davis's public humiliation were a study in institutional course correction. He was not kicked out of the Marine Corps. Colonel Jensen believed that would be a waste of a man who, though arrogant, could still become a good officer if he learned from his mistakes. Instead, Davis was relieved as squadron adjutant and reassigned to a staff position at the base headquarters, a humbling desk job. He was tasked with a very specific project: revamping the mandatory annual training on equal opportunity and professional conduct for the entire air station. He was now required to stand in front of his peers and subordinates and teach the very lesson he had so spectacularly failed to practice. It was a carefully administered, long-term dose of humility. Colonel Jensen, true to Sierra's wisdom, also implemented a new check-in briefing for all newly arrived personnel. Part of the briefing, led by Major Evans, now included a segment on joint service integration, emphasizing professional courtesy to members of other branches, regardless of their uniform or lack thereof when on base in a guest capacity. Photos of distinguished women in uniform, Sierra Knox among them, were added to the historical displays in the headquarters building lobby. The change was subtle but clear. This was everyone's Marine Corps. About a month later, Sierra was back on the base for a follow-up briefing. She was at the base exchange looking for a gift for her father when she heard a hesitant voice behind her. "Ma'am," she turned. It was Captain Davis. He was in his service Charlies, looking younger and far less confident than he had in the mess hall. He stood rigidly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Captain," she acknowledged with a neutral nod. He swallowed, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over her shoulder. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize properly. What I did, there was no excuse. It was unprofessional, disrespectful, and ignorant. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." The words came out stiffly, but they were sincere. She could see the deep, burning shame still in his eyes. Sierra studied him for a moment. She saw not the arrogant officer from the mess hall, but a chastened man who had been forced to confront a deep-seated bias he probably didn't even know he had. "I appreciate that, Captain," she said, her voice softening slightly. "Apology accepted." He seemed to sag with relief. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm running the new professional conduct training now. Your story, the Colonel's story about your call sign, it's the centerpiece of the leadership module." "Is it now?" A faint ironic smile touched her lips. "Yes, ma'am. It's about not making assumptions, about looking for the substance behind the surface." He finally met her eyes. "I'm trying, ma'am, to be a better officer." Sierra nodded slowly. "That's all anyone can ask, Captain. Keep your sleeves rolled sharp, but keep your mind open." She offered a small parting nod. "Good luck." As she walked away, leaving him standing in the aisle, she felt a sense of closure. It wasn't about victory or vindication. It was about the slow, difficult work of making the institution better, one corrected assumption, one humbled captain at a time. Her call sign was a reminder of a night of fire and fear. But perhaps now, on this base, it would also be a quiet reminder to always look deeper, to respect the warrior, not the package they came in. The stories of women like Major Sierra Knox are a vital part of our shared military heritage. They are leaders, innovators, and heroes who have served with courage and distinction. To honor their service and hear more stories of valor, please like this video, subscribe to She Wore the Stars, and share it with someone who needs to hear this story.